You've seen it happen. No shouting, no dramatic exit, no final argument, just silence. And somehow that silence feels heavier than anything they could have said. It's the kind of quiet that makes you uncomfortable, the kind that makes you replay everything in your head, the kind that makes you wonder, what just changed? Because something did. And if you've ever been close to an empath, you already know. When they go quiet like that, it's never random. It's not mood. It's not attitude. And it's definitely not weakness. It's a signal, a very quiet, but very final one. Here's what most people get wrong. They think silence is a strategy. They think the empath is pulling away to gain control, to punish, to make the other person chase. But that's not what's happening at all. An empath doesn't go silent to control the situation. They go silent because the situation is controlling them. Because what just hit them didn't come in one clean emotion. It didn't arrive as simple anger or simple sadness. It came as everything, all at once. Disappointment, confusion, a shift in tone, a subtle change in energy, something that didn't quite feel right, but couldn't be explained yet. And that's where it begins. Because empaths don't just hear words, they feel what's underneath them. They don't just listen to what you say, they register how you say it. The pause before the sentence, the slight change in your voice, the energy behind your words, things most people miss completely. An empath absorbs instantly, and when something feels off even slightly, it doesn't just pass through them, it stays. Now imagine this. You're in a moment. A conversation is happening in real time. Someone expects a response from you, but inside your mind, there's a flood. Questions stacking on top of questions. Why did that feel different? Was that intentional? Did something change? Am I overthinking or finally seeing clearly? And while all of this is happening internally, someone looks at you and says, "Just tell me what's wrong." But here's the truth no one talks about. At that moment, the empath doesn't have the answer yet, not in words. They feel it. They know something shifted. They know something hurt. But translating that into language takes time. Because they're not reacting. They're trying to understand. And the brain does something very specific when it's overwhelmed like this. It slows everything down. Not because it's weak, but because it's processing too much at once. Speech becomes harder. Thoughts feel incomplete. The emotion is clear, but the explanation isn't ready. So instead of saying something half-formed, they choose silence. And that silence, from the outside, it looks like distance. But on the inside, it's intensity. It's everything happening at once. But this didn't start overnight. Empaths weren't born like this. They learned it. Slowly, quietly, over time. There was a version of them that used to speak, that used to open up easily, that trusted people with what they felt. They explained things. They expressed emotions. They tried to be understood. And then something happened. Actually, not something. Many things. They were told they were too sensitive. They were told they were overreacting. They were made to feel like what they felt was too much, too dramatic, too inconvenient, or worse. They were understood in the moment, but later their vulnerability was used against them, thrown back during arguments, twisted, reframed, turned into something they regretted sharing. And that changes a person. Not loudly, not instantly, but gradually. They start thinking before they speak. Then they start filtering what they say. Then they start holding things in. And one day, without even realizing it, they reach a quiet conclusion. It's safer to feel everything than to say everything. Because feelings, they're private. But words make you vulnerable, so they adapt. They don't become less emotional. They become more controlled, more observant, more careful. And eventually, silence becomes their safest place, a place where they can process without being judged, where they can feel without being interrupted, where they can understand what's happening without someone rushing them to explain it. And once silence becomes safety, it's very hard to let it go. Now here's the part no one sees. When an empath goes quiet, their mind doesn't slow down. It gets louder. Every word gets replayed. Every shift in tone gets analyzed. Every pause, every look, every subtle detail gets examined. They don't just remember what happened. They remember how it felt. The exact second something changed. The moment the energy shifted. The small thing that didn't sit right, but couldn't be explained at the time. And once that process starts, it doesn't stop easily. They go back and forth in their mind, trying to separate assumption from reality, trying to understand, was that real, or am I imagining it? While others move on quickly, laugh it off, or forget it completely, the empath stays with it. Not because they want to suffer, but because they need clarity. For them, understanding matters more than reacting. Truth matters more than speed, so they sit in it. They turn it over from every angle. They don't leave the moment until it makes sense. And that's why they go quiet. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening, all at once. And this is where most people get it completely wrong, because they see the silence and assume disconnection. They think, they're pulling away. They don't care anymore. They're shutting me out. So what do? They push. They ask more questions. They demand answers. They try to force clarity. Right now. But pressure doesn't open an empath. It closes them. Because being rushed while they're still processing feels exactly like being dismissed, like their emotions don't matter, like their timing is wrong. And that feeling? It's familiar. It reminds them of every moment. They weren't given space to feel. So instead of opening up, they retreat deeper, quieter, more distant. Not because they don't care, but because they no longer feel safe. And the more someone pushes, the further they go. That's the paradox. The more you try to break an empath's silence, the less you'll ever hear the truth. Because silence was never the problem. Misunderstanding it was. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come at the beginning of something breaking, but at the very end of it. And most people don't recognize it until it's too late. Because this silence doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with ultimatums. It doesn't come with warnings. It doesn't even come with anger anymore. It comes with calm. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because when an empath is still arguing with you, there's still emotion. There's still hope. There's still something inside them that believes this can be fixed. But when they go quiet in this way, something has already shifted. This isn't the silence of confusion. This isn't the silence of overwhelm. This is the silence of realization. It's the moment they stop asking themselves, am I overthinking this? And start accepting, no, I was right about this all along. And once an empath reaches that point, they don't react. They don't explode. They don't try to prove anything anymore, because they don't need answers from you, when they've already found clarity within themselves. That's the silence people misunderstand the most, because from the outside, it looks peaceful, but inside, it's the end of emotional investment. See, empaths don't detach quickly. They don't just wake up one day and stop caring. They try. Over and over again, they try to understand you. They try to give you space. They try to adjust themselves so things don't fall apart. They notice patterns early, but they don't act on them immediately, because they give people chances. Not one, not two, but many. They wait. They observe. They hope that what they're feeling is wrong. But slowly, pattern by pattern, moment by moment, something starts becoming clear. The same behavior, the same tone, the same emotional inconsistency, the same feeling repeating itself. And at some point, it stops feeling like a misunderstanding and starts feeling like a pattern. That's when everything changes. Because once an empath sees a pattern clearly, they can't unsee it. They stop explaining it away. They stop justifying it. They stop blaming themselves for it. And instead of reacting emotionally, they begin to withdraw intentionally, not to punish you, not to manipulate you, but to protect what's left of themselves. And here's the part that hits the hardest. When an empath goes quiet at this stage, they're not trying to figure things out anymore. They already have. They're not confused. They're not overwhelmed. They're not even emotional in the same way anymore. They're done processing. Now they're deciding how much access you deserve, deciding how much energy they can keep giving, deciding whether this connection still feels safe. And they won't announce that decision, because empaths don't make noise when they're leaving something emotionally. They just leave. First internally, then externally. And by the time you notice the distance, they've already been gone for a while. This is why people say they changed suddenly. But it was never sudden. You just didn't see the quiet process behind it. You didn't see the moments they stayed silent instead of reacting. You didn't see the thoughts they kept to themselves. You didn't see how many times they chose understanding over confrontation. You saw the end, but not the journey. And here's something even deeper. Empaths don't just go quiet to protect themselves. Sometimes they go quiet to protect you. Because when they finally see everything clearly, they see more than just the situation. They see patterns. They see inconsistencies. They see truths that haven't been softened yet. And if they spoke in that moment, it wouldn't be filtered. It wouldn't be gentle. It wouldn't be easy to hear. It would be precise, accurate, and deeply uncomfortable. Because raw truth, without emotional processing, can cut deeper than anger ever could. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. And empaths know this. They know that words said in intensity don't disappear. They stay. They echo. They reshape relationships permanently. So instead of saying something they can't take back, they pause. They hold it in. They choose silence over damage, not because they don't feel enough to speak, but because they feel too much to speak carelessly. That's emotional responsibility. And it's rare. But here's the cost of that kind of silence. If it goes unrecognized, if it keeps getting misunderstood, if it keeps getting pushed against, eventually the empath stops trying to be understood at all. They stop explaining. They stop opening up. They stop expecting you to meet them emotionally. And that's when something irreversible begins. Because once an empath feels like their depth has no safe place to exist, they don't fight for connection anymore. They release it. Quietly. No closure speech. No dramatic goodbye. No final explanation. Just distance. That keeps growing. Until one day, you realize they're no longer there in the way they used to be. And by then, it's not silence anymore. It's absence. And absence is much harder to fix because silence still holds possibility. But absence means the emotional connection is already gone. This is the part most people regret. Not the arguments, not the misunderstandings, but the moments they misread silence and responded to it the wrong way. They pushed when they should have paused. They demanded answers when they should have offered space. They took it personally instead of understanding it. And in doing that, they unknowingly turned temporary silence into permanent distance. Because what an empath needed in that moment was never pressure. It was safety. Safety to feel without being judged. Safety to process without being rushed. Safety to speak only when the words were ready. And when they find that kind of safety, everything changes. They don't stay silent as long. They don't retreat as deeply. They don't feel the need to protect themselves from you. Because now, you're not the source of overwhelm. You're the place they can return to after it. And that's what makes an empath stay. Not intensity, not attachment, not even love alone, but emotional safety. The kind that says, "You don't have to rush here. You don't have to explain everything immediately. I'm not going anywhere while you figure it out." Oh, that's rare. And empaths recognize it instantly. So if you're someone who has an empath in your life, understand this clearly. Their silence is not rejection. It's not distance. It's not a game. It's a process, a deep internal one that most people will never fully understand. And how you respond to that silence determines everything. You can either meet it with pressure and push them further away, or you can meet it with understanding and become someone they feel safe enough to open up to. Because once an empath feels safe with you, truly safe, their silence changes. It softens, it shortens, it becomes something shared instead of something isolating. And when they finally speak, you'll realize something powerful. They were never silent because they had nothing to say. They were silent because what they had to say mattered too much to say it carelessly. Now, if you're the empath listening to this, there's something you need to hear. Your silence is not your weakness. It's your awareness, your depth, your ability to feel beyond the surface. You don't react quickly because you understand deeply. You don't speak immediately because you value truth over impulse. And in a world where most people speak without thinking, you think before you speak. That's not something to fix. That's something to protect. But here's the balance. Your silence should protect you, not isolate you. Because the right people, they won't fear your silence. They won't rush it. They won't take it personally. They'll respect it. They'll sit in it with you, not trying to break it, but trying to understand it. And when you find people like that, you won't feel the need to disappear. You won't feel the need to go quiet for so long, because you'll finally feel something rare, safe enough to be heard. And when that happens, your silence won't be the thing that defines your relationships anymore. Your truth will. Because at the end of the day, an empath's silence was never about distance. It was about depth. And the ones who understand that, they don't lose the empath. They keep them.